Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where we talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about SurrealEstate, Season 2, Episode 3. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So this case involves a apparent suicide that turns out not to be the case. It turns out it is a straight-up murder. Genevieve is this woman who had just gotten married and ended up supposedly killing herself. But when Luke and Susan show up, they get in contact with her. And I guess it's supposed to be representative of the fact is that her throat is so sore from the hanging. Because I'm sure like during the process, like her larynx and throat like was probably like crushed, so that's why she sounds the way she does. But she obviously doesn't know her killer, so it's like, right, did they sneak up behind her? Is it just the trauma of it all? Like, obviously we find out like what happened at the end of the episode, but it's like, I think because of that, like there was so much emotion involved that she just kind of blocked it all out. I think it's a combination of anger. Well, jumping ahead, we do find out who the killer is, but I love me a good murder mystery. And I thought it was so interesting, the only person we met present day was the son, Nathaniel, who I saw that actor. I was like, hey man, see him on so many things on this network. I want to say Bit was the first thing I saw him on this network. Maybe there was some others then, but I know like that, and obviously I know he was a pretty recurring character in Killjoys because he played their boss. I'm blanking on his character's name, but he was like the head of the Killjoys. So a lot of times he gets typecast. His character in Bitten was a different weirdo because he was on some like weirdo shit in that. So him being a weirdo in this, because obviously he got typecast. I think the times I've seen him, he does get typecast as either a weirdo or an asshole. Because his character in Killjoy was an asshole, a lovable asshole, but an asshole nonetheless. And so in this case, he's a weirdo, being like, "Are you a Sagittarius?" And Susan's like, "No, I'm an Aries." He's like, "Really? Are you sure you're an Aries? Can I smell your hair?" It's like, and even walk by later on smelling it. It's like, what a creep. And Susan's like, he sat here. He's got to be the killer. He smelled my hair. And then later on, they're kind of moving away from it as a suspect. She's like, he smelled my hair. And Zoe's being like, it's okay. We understand like what you went through. It's like, I'm so sorry that you had to go through that. Because it's like, he was such a creepo, dude. I mean, the little we got from him in the past, he was there. He's like, oh, well, they talk about, because Susan had all these different journals and stuff like that, where she kind of wrote, which is so interesting, and but you know, maybe that's, I said Susan, I mean Genevieve, and I guess like that's kind of supposed to be Genevieve. I guess that's supposed to represent a lot about Genevieve, where she's writing all this stuff in these journals that isn't necessarily true and isn't 100% applicable. Like in some cases, she was talking mad shit about people. Other cases, she wasn't, and it's like, oh, she was so in love with her husband, who's her third husband, Arthur, but it's like she didn't really love him because she actually had a side piece, W, which we find out who that is later on. But yeah, so I guess it was more like a, got it. I don't know if she thought he'd be reading those or whether it's just like her worldview of just kind of like, maybe she just substitute, like she tried to put all her feelings for W towards her husband, Arthur. Maybe that's the justification. Because like, once again, why lie in the books? Because that's why Nathan made a book of, what was it, in like the 90s, he wrote a memoir that was kind of like a tell-all book about his mom. He did not have the greatest relationship with his mom, kind of thought this and that about her, and as well, because all four of those people there that were, you know, there when she died, oh, it was Arthur, it was her best friend slash manager, her assistant, and her son from her second marriage. But like I was bringing up earlier, I thought it was interesting that he's the only one we met. Maybe the other three are dead. I wouldn't assume they were, but I guess because I think they were referenced, but I don't remember the team referencing what they were like present day. Like I said, Nathaniel was the only one we met and saw how much of a creepo weirdo he was. He's kind of a disturbed kid based on the journals and just a tiny bit we get, because our first introduction to him was like before the picture was taken. He was over there flicking a lighter, and you're like, okay. It seemed like he kind of liked to burn stuff. I think that's what they were kind of referencing in the journals. Like kind of a bit of a demon, so. Yeah, kid grew up kind of, I mean, it's like, well, your mom did, like, supposedly hang herself. Like, I mean, you were already disturbed, you're going to be even more disturbed, but, and his fascination with Susan, I wonder what that was about. And the fascination with her hair, I'm like, what is that? What was that? What did that stem from? Well, guess we'll never really know. There's actually a lot of really interesting elements to the whole situation with Genevieve saying, because like I said, I like the murder mystery of everyone trying to paint it out. They like play out the scenarios of like who could have done it and for what reasons, because it's like, well, it can't be Nathaniel because in the suicide note he's referred to as Nate. He was very upset about Zoe and Luke calling him Nate. He made a point to be like, I'm Nathaniel. I wonder, does that stem somewhere because like maybe his mom would call him Nate and maybe he hated that? I mean, they never introduced that in the story, but it's like, why does he like hate being called Nate? I mean, I guess for him it feels like it's diminishing. It's like, no, my name is Nathaniel. Show me some respect. Calling me Nate is very like dismissive in some capacity, maybe in his mind. But either way, so like I said, they ran through all these different scenarios, and it's like, well, it's got to be one of them. And I love that this simple thing of something you don't think about. It's like, well, if none of them are the suspects, it's like, well, you got to think about it. It's like, here's all four of the only people who are in the house based on the police report, right? Well, who's taking the photo? Because even I thought to immediately was like, oh, it was like her best friend / a manager or whatever that ended up like taking like setting it to automatic. Because I don't know, like they probably specify, but I don't remember the year that was in Genevieve's death and stuff. So, and I thought it was so interesting too, because you figured Mr. Tolliver had to have something to do with it, because he was the one that was expressly being like, yes, she's never done it to anyone else but me. And he was just kind of like, he said something to Susan pretty early on in the episode that seemed like, you were like, that seemed weird. It seemed very like dismissive. But once again, it's kind of that thing in a TV show. I guess it's like, oh, who did it? The person that's in the episode a lot, or the person who's not in the episode at all, really? And he's not in the episode at all, really. He's only at the beginning and basically at the end of the, like, two things at the end of the episode. Because Susan went home and ended up getting visited by him. It's like, oh, this house of yours is special. And I guess it acts as, I don't know if it has something to do with who Susan is. I mean, maybe the house, Susan thinks she chose the house, but maybe the house chose her in a very like Doctor Who way. I always go back to it because I always love that line of like, oh, the Doctor thought he stole a TARDIS, but the TARDIS is like, no, I stole me a Time Lord. You know, it kind of makes me think of that. Like the house, like Susan thinks, oh, I chose this house. It's like, no, this house chose you, because maybe it's just her abilities and her connection to all like the supernatural, like maybe there's something there that drew her specifically, maybe just everything in her life, and maybe just because obviously she also has a personal connection, because we kind of cut back to that this episode, and I feel like there's something deeper there. The fact that she's dreaming a lot about it, because she has very nostalgic memories about the place, and especially because they go out of the way that when her dad's playing the piano, they don't show you her dad's face, so it feels like not like they're hiding it, but it feels like it's significant. Like there's something that maybe is so buried deep, connected to this place that happened in the past that Susan just doesn't remember, because maybe she herself is blocking it, but maybe it's trying to rise to the surface. But it's like this house is taking an interest in her, and it's like, it does seem like it loves her and is obsessed with her, but it's also, I don't know, it's not doing everything for, like, she had to tell it like, oh, turn off the alarm, open the door, because unlocking the door, it makes sense because it doesn't want her to leave, which it feels like that's going to be a future story point thing, but we'll get to it. But it just seems like the house doesn't want her to leave, but you would think it would nail everything. When she's like, oh, like turn the alarm on, she had to tell it like multiple times, you would think it would be on it immediately, I don't know, not unless it's trying to drive little by little. Like I said, maybe it's still not perfected, and it's like it has like a symbiotic relationship with Susan, and maybe that symbiosis hasn't really fully set in yet. Maybe that's what it is. So it has to, like, we have to be completely on the same wavelength, and we're not 100% there. We're not 100% synchronized. But one moment we do, you're mine, and I'm gonna keep you forever type of thing. We don't know what this house's deal is. You know, whether it's just the house itself, you'd assume it's some spirit inhabiting it, but who and why? Was it staying here all those years ago? And has it just been waiting for Susan to come back? Because maybe it imprinted on her all those years ago, and now that she's back, like, it really is latching on to her and never wants to let her go. Like I said, maybe it has something to do with her dad. It feels like it, because they're setting that up, and they're making a whole point of how this place is connected to her past with her dad. But either way, the reason why I went on that tangent regardless, because obviously that's still part of the plot, but it feels like that's what led the house situation to be what it is. Like I said, I don't know if that's more the house, or whether that's more of a Susan thing, or whether it is a situation that the house acted as a conduit for Susan. But anyway, she was able to talk to Mr. Tolliver. His name was it Warden? And because Phil was like, yeah, it's an acronym. Not acronym. anagram for Andrew, which is the caretaker's name. It was it Andrew Oliver or something like that. He was the gardener. That's what it's like, right? He ended up quitting the day after Genevieve's death, but he ended up confessing, like, right, they were in love. He was 22 in love, but he broke it off with her because she was saying, like, oh, hey, like, I'm gonna be married to my husband. I'll use his money, but I'll love you. You're where my heart really lies. He's just a means to an end. But for Andrew, it's like, well, I didn't have much self-respect, but I figured, like, no, I deserve more than that. Like, I loved her, but she was so distressed about it that she, like, had an episode and was just kind of, like, threatening to kill herself. And even he's like, I don't know if she ever really actually would have drunk, or was she was just being very dramatic or not. Because even her son was like, yeah, she had her dramatic moments, and maybe she was being very dramatic in that moment. She was never going to do it. Who knows? They'll never know. But during the struggle of him trying to stop her, she fell over. It was a complete accident. You know? And Tolliver was like, I wanted that at the very least, someone to know the truth, that it wasn't like I killed her, it was an accident. She was the person I loved more than anything. Our issues aside, like, I did love her. I even loved later on Susan's like, I mean, there is that complicated thing of you were older, and there's the, power dynamic thing that's a little complicated in your relationship. But yeah, he loved you deeply, so. And making her understand that it wasn't, he didn't do it on purpose. He loved you. And he didn't, like, murder you. Because it seems like from the very beginning, that's what this was all about. That's what even Tolliver was saying. Like, she wasn't telling you to find her killer because she didn't remember. She was trying to tell you, I am the killer. Because they weren't able to find him in the entire episode. So it seemed like she had already grabbed him up. So she had kind of, like, it seemed like she was kind of, I don't know if he was just gone, like if he was just in the wind, or whether that's kind of implying like she had him the entire time, but just kind of had him in a space where she disappears to in like the ethereal world or whatever, and she took him with her, and he was kind of a prisoner, and the only way to solve this was by solving the murder. But it's like, what ends up happening is, it turns out she's like, I already set him free, and then you turn, and turns out he's dead in the chair. Apparently he had died from a heart attack. So multiple things to think about. One, is that kind of implying he died and then he visited Susan, or did he die after he visited Susan? Because it's like, right, I know the truth now. I mean, I wanted someone to know the truth, and now that Susan did, and like he ended up dying then because he could finally be free, because he'd held on to that guilt for so long. He ran away, he quit his job and ran away, started in life, like the thing that Genevieve's money was going to, like that horse, I don't know, it wasn't a horse rescue, but it was kind of like a school thing for horses, kind of a horse rescue thing. Because of that, like all her money went to that, because no one, not even her husband got any, nor Nathaniel, but all her money went to that. And he would also donate some money. Like he built a good life for himself. But then like a year ago, he came back because he'd been drowning in nightmares about it. He had felt riddled with guilt over it. And he was hoping to basically put those ghosts to rest the moment he came here, but he was haunted by it all over again. There was no escaping what he'd done. But for the first time, he was finally free. And like I said, I don't know if that's indicative of he died. Because it seems like Genevieve didn't know until Susan explained everything. But I think he himself had kind of finally like let go. But I mean, it still has a beautiful ending. It's sad and tragic, but it's still this beautiful ending at the end where they are together, Despite everything, it's like she's kind of at peace, and so is he, and they're able to kind of, whether they'll reunite every so often, like the sex ghost from the couple that bangs it out like on the Saturdays, whether it becomes a situation like that, we'll ultimately have to wait and see. But it could just be like our final dance of we are reunited, everything's cleared up, and I love you and I love you, and they're just kind of going to the great beyond together like that. And especially how it pans up to like the light in the room feels like that is what it's supposed to be indicative of them finally dancing into the light, being reunited and being together, not being driven apart by this nightmare of a situation, this tragedy that just, happened, This, that whole thing with Susan, too, obviously, like, once again, her and Luke have been butting heads of differences of opinions of kind of running things, but also, like, Luke taking charge, being like, oh, like, I'm the one that has experience with this. And she's like, Luke, if you still had your powers, we wouldn't be in this situation in the first place. I think for her, it's like, I'm tired of coddling you. Like, the fact of the matter is, I've been doing a good job, but you refuse to recognize that. You come in here, like, swinging your dick around, essentially. It's like, yes, I get this was your business, and you feel insecure. We tackled that last episode. We thought you'd be better about it, but still like, no, your little comments here and there, you're not funny, your little jokes, you're being very dismissive of me. Like, it's just, it feels very personal to Susan, understandable. And it's just like, I need a break. He's like, yeah, that's why I told you work-life balance. She's like, no. From you. I had to deal with my boss. I was in a relationship. I thought things would be better if I came here, and now I'm having a repeat of that. But he's like, whoa, 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 do not put me in the same company as him. But for Susan, it's like, right, you've just been so controlling, which makes sense. I think it is a thing of Susan can empathize up to a certain point, but it's just up to a certain point where it's just like, right, this isn't your rodeo anymore. I get it. You're so scared because she called him out last episode of like, right, I know you don't want to be too much like Kit, but you're a lot like him. You're afraid to admit that you're like him. And he's like, wow, that's super mean. And she kind of went off on like when she was like, right, when she kind of got on him about like, if you had your powers, we wouldn't be in this situation. It's like, yikes. That was kind of very like, you went for the jugular on that. But once again, she was tired of his bullshit. It's like, I get it. I understand. But like the fact of the matter is, don't take it out on me, your insecurities that you've also like something has been a part of your life for so long and you don't have control anymore. And now you're kind of like pushing that control onto me, because you yourself have lost a step and you don't want to admit it, I mean, he admitted it a little bit in episode 1, but not really, He's still kind of taking his steps forward, but that what she said to him at the end of the episode really got to him, So, but to me, I was kind of worried. I'm like, that's kind of bad, because I was like, right, we know your house situation. They were willing to lock you up and make sure you didn't, like, leave. Like, in the episode, you had to be like, yo, open the door, and it finally did it. But the thing is, you're going to be chilling at home for a while. The only times you might leave is maybe to go visit your mom, but you might call her on the phone. You just want to relax in the house, and and maybe that's exactly what it was waiting for. Because now no one's going to bother you because they're like, well, if we can't get in contact with Susan, that's because she wanted a break from all of us. So let's respect her, and so they're probably not going to notice like when she's in trouble because of the terrible timing, or maybe it's the perfect timing on the on behalf of the house, but. I felt like the moment Susan was like, I'm going to take a break and stay at home, I'm like, yeah, that's not going to be good. Because when shit hits the fan, because it inevitably will, and in fact will, they won't be able to kind of help her because they won't even know she's in trouble necessarily until like Luke puts aside his pride and kind of like finally like nuts up and goes like, right, I was kind of being an asshole, goes to check on her, and then they find out. The question then becomes, well, how long will they be before they find out? An episode, 2, maybe more. We'll have to wait and see. Kind of on the front of, let me, since I'm on that conversation, Zoe did tell Luke of like, oh yeah, like if I, went in more so like, wanted to be like the realtor person, like the seller, like what if I, would you hire me? And Luke is like, yeah, of course. Like, you're already part of the team. So when she's like, yeah, I actually already got my license. He's like, okay. And he's like, yeah, let's kind of transition you into that little by little. And she's like, oh, thanks. And kind of like walks away because she wants to try and make it seem like it's not a big deal, but it does mean a lot to her. I think she's one of those people that like, when she kind of goes for something, she doesn't want to ever admit it or acknowledge like, oh, this is something I actually wanted. Like, I'll play it down, but it is actually super dope to have your praise and your willingness to give me a chance. That also popped up in my head now that Susan's taking a break, and well, Zoe would probably want to use this as an opportunity to prove herself. I'm sure she's going to be there to kind of help compensate for the workload. So it's like both her and Luke, like Luke will probably take over a lot of the Susan stuff, the stuff that Susan was already doing. He kind of already did. Not saying like, it's because he forcefully kind of took over a lot of that regardless. And Susan kept up some of the clients, but I'm sure like Luke is going to start sending some of that Zoe's way next episode. So we'll kind of really get to see. I think that's going to be an interesting thing, like Zoe's personality and who she is. Gelling with this particular job is definitely going to be interesting to see how those two elements kind of mesh together. That job of being like the person that talks and selling a house to someone, how she handles, because she's not Luke and she's not Susan, she's herself. And I think she'll eventually find that middle ground between like, taking who she is and applying it to the job. Like, I think finding her own voice. I'm curious, is she going to try and copy? Is she going to be so by the book that it's going to be an issue because she can't compare? Is she going to try and be more Susan? Is she going to try and be more Luke until she feels more comfortable just being herself? Like I said, finding her own voice as a realtor. You know, so I think that's going to be an interesting element. But also in this episode, we had August. It seems like he's working on a device to potentially help give Luke back some of his mojo, which I even love. Is always like, yeah, but make sure it doesn't do anything to his hair, because it's like, that's got to be something we got to take care of, you know? Some very, very interesting development. It's going to be interesting to ultimately see where all of this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.